21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Bissinger's is a 350-year-old French chocolate company that started out as the candy maker to King Louis XIV. Today, I'll tell you the story how Bissinger's has gone from 1668 Paris, France, to the United States in 1845, and how we evolve and create new products in 2025 and beyond. I actually grew up in the chocolate business. My parents started a candy company in 1981, 5 years before I was born. And from the age of 5, 6, and 7 years old, I would go visit my dad at the original store. There was a little candy kitchen in the back. I would help sweep the floor. I would help stock the store. It had a little bit of a retail store, manufacturing, warehouse component. So I was able to learn everything from a very young age and just absolutely fell in love with chocolate. And as far as I can remember, I have been working in the chocolate business. I always say that I started working the day I could walk. We don't exactly know when Bissinger started. We just know that in 1668, they were appointed the confesseur impérial by King Louis XIV, which translates into English as confectioner to the empire. So our assumption is that they started a couple years before that and probably had a chocolate shop on the boulevards of Paris, and they were approached by someone in the palace. But for the majority of their time in Paris, they were there to serve the royal family, and they spent a lot of time in the Palace of Versailles. And it wasn't until the 1800s, it was actually 1845, when the Bissinger's family moved to the United States and brought the recipe book and actually one of their candy makers with them to open up their first shop here in Cincinnati. And that was the first time as a consumer you could actually go into a Bissinger shop in the United States. So it took about half of its history, almost 150 years, to get to where you can actually go in and publicly buy Bissinger's confections. And then in 1927, the Bissinger's family moved the company to St. Louis, Missouri, where we've been headquartered today for almost 100 years. And then my family came into the business in 2019, where we believe the seventh owner. The Bissinger's family held on to the ownership until the mid-1940s. And so they were the first owners. So for hundreds of years, it was all under Bissinger's ownership. And then we believe we're the seventh owner total. One of the things at Bissinger's it always weighs on us, the story's already been crafted. And as we're 6 years into owning this company, we're not even a fraction of a percentage of its tenure. So we have to always make sure that anything we do that gets the Bissinger's name put on it has to really represent 350 plus years of excellence. And it's a big responsibility. The last recipe book that a Bissinger's family member passed down that we have in our possession is from 1899. And so many of the confections that we produce today come from that. Even a lot of the newest creations that we do were based off the 1899 recipe book, and then we've adapted. For example, we made a pear walnut caramel recently. Pears are very popular fruit flavor in France. Walnuts are very popular tree nuts. So we wanted to create an autumn confection that really represented, the Bissinger's history that really started in Paris. That caramel, even though that was new to Bissinger's, the caramel base goes back 300 plus years. It's just the new natural flavoring and nuts that we put in it to make it unique and a new creation. So we always, kind of adapt into the old world of Bissinger's when we're working on new items. And then everything we do is handmade. I mean, the product is hand decorated, hand packaged, hand stirred in kettles. And so every single confections, the millions of confections that we make every year, there's not a single one that's alike. So one of the things growing up in the chocolate business, after you do, retail and manufacturing for so long, there's this kind of this niche as an entrepreneur to try something else and to try something else. And so we really started pushing wholesale growth, and it allowed us to go to trade shows, and we started at regional trade shows, then national trade shows. And if you've ever been to a trade show, it's a painful process. You have to, sleep in a hotel. You never sleep the first night. Usually you have to go on your feet for 10 to 12 hours a day, and then go entertain at a dinner. And it was, and then you're making promises and you're trying to work with salespeople. But in the whole time, there's a business running behind you. So we're in New York or California or Chicago, and the business is still running. So we're always checking email. We're always checking on the business. We're trying to, make sure everything's orders are getting out, and inventory is coming in. And then as you talk to customers, you feel that you want to keep growing and growing and growing. And growth is such a interesting thing. In some cases, it's great, but in some cases, it's painful. We always say growing pains can hurt. And one of the times, it was around 2015, 2016, we were in this very aggressive growth pattern, but we would, start out from wholesale orders to the independent mom and pops where they were $200 and $300 orders. Then they went to the several $1,000 orders. Then we were shipping pallets, and then we had these calls and opportunities to get into those truckload size orders. And when you're small and you're growing quickly, it's an ego thing. It's a pressure thing. It's, can I do this? Can I prove it to myself? And so we did. We went into that mode. We invested another $1 million+ into some more automated high-speed equipment. We promised some customers that we can do some high volume, multi-million piece chocolate jobs that we're running with automatic depositing systems and automatic wrapping, humanless. We had one line running at 7 pieces a second. And we thought that all of the volume that it would do and all of the revenue that would bring in would just be the game changer for the business. And although it brought in a lot of revenue, which was a lot of volume, but it was some of the most uninspiring work we've ever done. And it upset me, partly because it upset me and I still had to pay off this equipment. So I couldn't throw my hand in the air and say, well, I made a mistake. Let's just stop doing this. Because once we committed to these investments, we were stuck in a way. But I learned as I'm going through this, as we were going through tons, and I mean tons, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 pounds of chocolate a day. And it's backbreaking work to load them into the tanks. The tanks would hold 5,000 pounds of chocolate. We'd have to load them every day and move pallets around and forklifts and load trucks and build a team that can do that. And as you're building a team, there's health insurance and there's human resources that have to come on board, and so much levels of middle management that it's, if you read a business 101 book, it all starts there. But if you hire everybody you need right away, you'll go out of business. And so you have to layer it in as things are going. And we hated it. We hated that side of the business. We started out as this small batch artisan manufacturing company, and that side of the manufacturing facility never changed. It was kind of the new wing that I just hated being in. And it was, if I came and brought a customer on a tour, it was the most exciting part of the tour to see. Product running so fast, beautifully with robotics and humanless, completely automated, closed loop systems. But yet it didn't have soul. It was like anybody can do it. And as I reflected back, I said, anyone with $1 million could just do this. And so COVID, there was 2 things that kind of happened. One is we had this opportunity to buy this brand, Bissinger's, and they were the complete opposite. They were the much more hands-on and everything hand-packed and hand-dipped, and it was the most artisanal brand that I've ever seen. And it kind of went back to our original DNA. And I said, this is what I think is going to be the best for us. We are the masters at this. And it's just, we were so unhappy doing, the work that the big box retail truckload orders that everybody thinks they want and everyone says is the biggest thing in the world, and you can go around the country and seeing your product in thousands of big box stores. That seems to be the dream until until we got to it, and then we realized it was not. It was the nightmare. Um, so in COVID, we had just bought Bissinger's, and we still had those commitments, but those accounts and operations paused for about 6 months because of retail closed and everything going on. When they came back on board, we said, you know what? We're just going to walk away from it. We've changed courses. So we used kind of the umbrella of a pandemic to get out of this. And we had been in it for about 4 years. So all of the profits that we're generating from it, we just reallocated to making sure we can pay those equipment notes off and not have that financial burden. But it was the biggest life lessons I think I've ever had in the chocolate industry. We thought we wanted to touch the sun and double and triple and quadruple our volume, but we really didn't. We wanted to make really small batch artisan chocolates. My parents started the business. I was the first of my siblings to get involved in the business at a young age, and I absolutely loved it. It was, on the one hand, it was an excuse to hang out with my dad, and on the other hand, it was the chocolate industry that I absolutely loved. So I would come in. We would all work the holidays, but I was the one that would raise my hand first and says, "I want to go into work," where my siblings were more felt that it was the obligation. But now eventually all of us went in the business and absolutely love it. But my sister graduated college 3 years before me, so she wanted to go in the business, and she was the first one full time out of school. And then I came out 4 years later, or 3 years later, and then my brother graduated 4 years later. So in a 7 year span, we all got in the business. But you go to school, you do this your entire life. I've seen my dad when the business was very lean and things were tight. I've seen it when we had good years, and so we didn't really talk about salary much in the beginning. I was just hoping for, I was hoping that, a college grad that had worked in this business for his entire life would be, given a good salary. And so he kind of came in, the first day, and I got out of college, and he said, "Here's the deal. We're paying about $10 an hour in our retail stores. So I'm gonna pay you that. If you want to make more, which I assume you do, go build the business." And so I lived at home for the first few years, and I saved up, and I literally worked morning in, first in, last out. I traveled more. I had more status points on every airline because I traveled a little, if I can go find a customer and get a meeting, I would. And my siblings did the same thing, everything we could to build a business, from knocking on local doors to and as we do that, it was because we're a manufacturer, we make what we sell. And you have to keep layering and hiring and equipment. And then as you run out of space, you keep adding, real estate. And so this process, I can't tell you, I feel like I'm a general contractor now, not because I want to be, it's because we've built so many manufacturing facilities and so many additions and so many retail stores that I feel like I do this in my sleep. And because I live in the business, to me, I can't sit at my desk. I have to be a part of the process and creation on the production floor. And my brother and sister feel the same way. So what I thought was at 14 years old that I would be the only one in the chocolate business and they'd be doing completely different things. They all got involved and love it. And I never knew this was a big deal. I had a customer. I was telling this story to a customer one time, and they couldn't believe it. But at 12 o'clock every day, my brother, sister, and I sit down and have lunch together. And we have retail stores and distribution centers and, 2 facilities. And so we will actually schedule our day around. So if I'm going to go out to a store that's 45 minutes away, I'll schedule my day around to be back here at noon. And they do the same. So I would say out of 250 days that we're here, excluding weekends, or 260, we probably have lunch together 245 of them. So the vast majority of them. And I think that's really important because although 99% of the time we get along, even if there's any ever, conflict that we have to do, kind of that breaking bread reset is really important to us. And we were doing it for years before someone noticed, and they're like, "That's the coolest thing in the world." I said, "Oh, we just have lunch together." I never really thought anything. It was never designed or planned, um, but it's really stood out for people, and so I love telling that story. But I think the most important part, because I've seen family businesses that really don't work, and I've seen family businesses that do, and I think the most important part for us, and the reason ours works so well, is that my brother, sister, and I, all three, really do different parts of the business, and our minds are very different. So we have that same drive, and usually on the big things we agree. But my sister is such a left-brained business person that she handles payroll, and she handles accounts receivable, and she handles special ordering. So much of the business logistics. And although I'm her backup when she's out of town, those are the most frustrating things for me to do ever. I can do it, and I do when she's on vacation, but I would rather be overseeing the production schedule, walking down onto the production floor, making sure that production meets quality and specs, ordering product creation, product innovation, working with the creative department on creating, the website and the catalog and the next, and then, we bring them into the fold, because she's not as involved as a candy maker by trade, where I learned as a candy maker my entire life. And then my brother actually works exclusively in our candy kitchen. So he and our other head candy maker are two chief chocolatiers, and he lives on the production floor and almost rarely comes to the office. So we really have three different sides of the business that we work on, and three different areas, like physically in the space as well. Right now we're in a cocoa crisis that we've never seen before. So to put it in perspective, in 2023, uh, the cocoa futures were hovering at about 2,500. And I would say, as far as I've been in the business, and the people I talked to going back to the 70s, 60s, as far as chocolate has been, a commodity traded on the open market, anytime the cocoa market hit 3,000, it was like a red alert for chocolate. That was the big number. If you're at $3,000 a ton, you don't go out and book, too far in the future, because that's a huge number. So 3,000 really was the biggest we've ever seen. Well, in January of 2024, it hit 4,000, and everybody started getting really nervous. We've never seen this before. What's going on? And so we were all starting to, everybody's looking at the commodity traders. That the commodity traders that have been trading cocoa have been the least popular, people on the trading floor until January of 2024. Now they're the most popular people on the trading floor. I know these guys by their cell phone numbers, and I know everybody now, and we talk to them weekly. They've got to be the most popular kids in the playground now, and so it hit 4,000, and it was this shock to the system. And it was like, well, what happened? And, we thought this was speculator driven. And then, because market conditions, most of the cocoa comes out of Africa. And so we didn't see really anything, there wasn't rain or drought or civil unrest. There wasn't anything that was really, we were seeing in our data. Why did the speculators see something that we didn't? So we were hoping and praying and guessing, given 40, 50 years of history, that it was just a blip. I wish I would have not thought that and just bought up, an extra 1,000,000 pounds of cocoa, because that summer it got to 11,700 of last year. And then it started to drop. So we were seeing it drop, and we, pretty consistently. So we were thinking it was coming back down. It got to the mid sixes, about 6,500 or so. And this was kind of the time we said, okay, well, I guess things are starting to self-correct. Maybe the speculators got it wrong, and they're starting to, sell their positions and whatnot. And then the mid-crop for 2024 comes out last year in October, and it went back up to 11,700. I think it even hit 12,000. So today, 2025, we're hovering around 9,000. So still, we're talking about 3 times higher than it's ever been in history. And in 2020, COVID times, it dropped to like 2,200. So we're talking about, 3 times higher than history, 4 times higher than 2020. So we are dealing with, our number one purchase is chocolate. It's chocolate packaging. labor and sugar, and overhead. That's what makes up a box of chocolates. And our number one expense is 3 times higher, the cocoa commodity, than it was before. And, I've had a lot of people ask me, like, how are you handling this? And the first thing that I usually say is that, well, because of COVID, we've had to deal with about 250 crises in the last 5 years, and every single one of them we've gotten through and solved and lived another day. This one is a little different. It's very painful. In the perspective of we get deliveries every week of chocolate, and those deliveries are now costing about $25,000 more a week for the same exact product. Now, there's a whole world out there of, the big billion-dollar brands that make mass-produced cookies that you'll find in the grocery store aisle that have maybe a chocolate drizzle on top. If you really look closely, they're starting to say, instead of chocolate chip cookies, they might say fudgy cookies or chocolatey cookies, because they've decided now, because of this crazy cocoa crisis, that they're going to get out of chocolate and use a compound or a coating. And then there's a new industry out there that is making called CBEs, which are called cocoa butter equivalents. So they're making a product that looks like chocolate, tastes like chocolate, but doesn't have the cocoa butter, which is that delicious natural fat that's found inside the cocoa bean. And there's always innovation, out of crises and changes in innovation, but we will not go that route. And as painful as it will be, chocolate is our number one thing. We've been doing this longer than we believe anybody. And when we believe all of the pain and, hard work that goes into hand making confections, I just can't use subpar ingredients to save money. So from my perspective, although it's a very painful price increase, and that we're dealing with this one after we've dealt with so many issues in the last few years with supply chain and COVID and labor issues and overhead expenses going up and major food safety regulation changes and fill in the blank, UPS or shipping rates going up and et cetera, et cetera. This one is where we all kind of dealt with UPS or shipping issue prices increases over the years. We all dealt with, when packaging cost and paperboard costs went up so much. Chocolate is just us, the chocolate industry together is just feeling this. And so other industries don't have this problem. So the product's going to cost a little bit more to make, for sure. It's going to cost a little bit more at the retail shelves. But what we're trying to do is just pass on the increase, a non-margin increase on it. So if we have an extra $3 of raw materials in a gift box, we're just going to raise the price by $3. So no additional margin on it. In fact, it's going to be less margin because of the pass-through cost. And we do that because our customers are our family. We know some of them by name. They've been with us for 10 years, 20 years, 2 weeks. It depends when they came on board as a Bissinger's customer, but it's a respect thing. And, although my price has gone up significantly, I don't like 30 and 40, 50% price increases. And I assume my customers don't either. So we're doing everything we can to keep it. Now, what is our hope? Our hope is going to stabilize. And then, if say it stabilizes in a year, we won't lower prices. We're just hoping that the 2026 prices that come down, that's when we can make up in margin. And that's just, how it works. So we always look at things in 3 to 5 year increments. And COVID taught us that, like, you can't react to the now, because now is crazy. We need to look at a little bit longer tails, and hopefully that in a 3-year period, we may get the margin back. Otherwise, we'll have to just do a small price increase again. The funny thing is, we're in 2024, we broke ground on a multi-million-dollar expansion, and we've been very tight. Production has been growing, sales have been growing, and we've been getting very tight on capacity. And so there was a property next door that we've always been trying to acquire, and we had the opportunity in 2024. So in February 1st, 2024, we bought the building, we closed on it, and we tore it down right away. And as we tore the building down and started surveying the land, we started drawing up blueprints for the new facility. which is doubling the size of our current factory. So it's a major multi-million-dollar expansion. And as this is happening, so we're going back just a little bit of a timeline. January of 2024 is when the first shoe fell, as you'd say it, where chocolate broke that $4,000 a ton. We were already under contract. February 1st was closing. And so we are now, just to buy the land was a 7-figure investment, but then to tear it down was cost money, and then to build a multi-million-dollar facility on top. We were in it. We were committed. And not one time did we think we should pivot, because I believe that, sometimes you just have to double down. And one of the lessons I've learned in life from other entrepreneurs is usually running in the opposite direction is the smartest thing to do. And, I was fascinated. It was a podcast I was listening to one time about the history of Rolex, and in the 2008 economic crisis in the United States, all of the luxury brands stopped advertising to save money. And Rolex is like, no, we're going to double down. We're going to double our advertising budget. And their market share went crazy. And I feel like this is our Rolex moment. I feel like what we need to do is, in this cocoa crisis that we're in, when we're shaking up the industry, I think we need to double down. We are very much investing in building this new facility expansion. We're also, because we're family owned and operated, and we don't have any shareholders or a board to report to, we did it our way. And so one thing that my brother, sister, and I were adamant about and passionate about is making it a better tour experience. And so we're adding this cafe and wine bar for all of our tourists to experience when they're coming on a factory tour. And then we decided that since we're opening a wine bar, why not do cocktails? And what's the most fun and exciting way to do cocktails as a private speakeasy? So we are not only building a chocolate factory, we're building a cocktail lounge and a coffee shop and wine bar cafe. None of that's which we've never run, but we drink coffee and we feel like we can put the two and two together. So we're very excited to later in 2025 as all of this comes to life. Although we are based in St. Louis and our retail boutiques are here in St. Louis, Missouri, Bissinger's products can actually be found all over the United States. So not only can you order it at bissingers.com, which is open 24/7, you can also find all of our chocolates and confections at all of the Barnes & Noble bookstores nationwide, as well as select department stores and specialty grocery stores as well.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.